Welcome to the Food Junkies Podcast. Here, we aim to bring you the experience, strength, and hope of professionals working on the front lines in the field of food addiction. Our mission is to educate you, the listener, and increase overall awareness about food addiction as a recognized disorder. Here, we discuss all things recovery, exploring the many pathways people take towards abstinence in order to achieve a health-forward lifestyle. We hope to inspire you to thrive rather than just survive. So stay positive, make a change for yourself, and share your journey with others. And hopefully the message will spread.
Welcome to the Food Junkies Podcast. My name is Dr. Vera Tarman, and I am your host today along with Clarissa Kennedy. Today, we speak with Dr. Evelyn Roy. Dr. Roy is a family medicine physician who graduated from the University of Montreal in 2015 and from Laval University in 2012. She is also board certified in obesity medicine by the American Board of Obesity Medicine. Additionally, she trained with Dr. Jason Fung and Megan Ramos in Toronto in 2016 and 2019 at their Intensive Dietary Management Clinic. She also trained with Dr. George Eady on the ketogenic diet and mental health, and with Bitten Jonsson on food addiction, and on hormone replacement therapy with Dr. Neal Rouzier and Dr. Sylvie Demers. She has co-authored 8 best-selling books in French and on the following topics: low-carb and ketogenic diets, the metabolic Mediterranean diet, fasting, metabolic health, and reversing lifestyle-related chronic conditions such as obesity, fatty liver disease, and type 2 diabetes. Eat Fat to Lose Weight with the Keto and Low Carb Diet is the only one that was translated into English and is available on Amazon. In 2017, Dr. Roy founded Clinique Reversa, which was a not-for-profit metabolic program that aims to help people reverse their lifestyle-related chronic conditions such as type 2 diabetes, obesity, hypertension, gout, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, and so on. The clinic treated over 2,000 patients before closing its doors during the pandemic. 3 years ago, we spoke to Evelyn about her clinic on metabolic care and the difficulties she had in setting this up. Today, we would like to explore what she has done since then, as well as to learn more about her clinical experience managing metabolic disease. What exactly is metabolic disease? What is fatty liver disease? And why is it important to the food addict? Welcome, Evelyn.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Yes, thank you. Please give us an update of what you have done since we spoke to you in 2022. For example, you've written many books, you opened another new clinic, you started a metabolic summit in French, and you launched a new podcast.
Yeah, in 2021, my family and I, we moved to Singapore for 2 years. So for 2 years, I could not practice medicine officially. So I used up that time to do more training, to research more, write more books. So I wrote, 3 maybe during that time. And I got a certification in addiction medicine with the University of Sherbrooke, and continued my training with Bitten Jonsson on food addiction and hormone replacement therapy. So really, it was a time for me to just not have the pressure to make money, just have all the time in the world to dig into my interests, with the knowledge that eventually we were going to move back to Montreal and continue. I would resume my activities as a doctor. I ran out of time in those 2 years of full-time working on what makes me feel passionate about medicine and stuff. But still, I got quite a lot done. So when I came back, I decided not to be working for the public system anymore. The healthcare public system, I'm not sure how it is in the rest of Canada, but in Quebec, it is not going really well. And it's getting tougher and tougher for a family doctor to actually do real medicine that is digging at the root causes of the problems that our patients are facing. There's tremendous pressure on us to see more patients, prescribe more, see them less time, do quick interviews with them and quickly get them out. And it's really not about the money for the majority of the doctors. It's really about the demand, the pressure. Yeah. So many people are sick. So many people need to be seen, need to consult a doctor, that if we spend an hour with each patient, then we wouldn't have enough doctors and it would take too long. But So the way the system is now in 2024 is that every patient gets 10 minutes, 15 minutes, but you don't get to dig at the root causes. You don't get to talk about lifestyle habits, nutrition, food addiction, sleep, exercise, muscle mass. You don't get to talk about those things that actually really make a difference if you're thinking about reversing diseases, or if you're thinking about preventing diseases, or just helping people who have issues that are related to their lifestyle habits. So I made the switch. I went from public to private, and I have no regret because I'm finally focusing 100% of my time is focused on doing the medicine that I love, that makes me really happy, and that I feel makes a difference.
Now, just a question out of that. You're describing what Ontario is like too. We don't even have time in that 10 minutes or so. All we have time is to write a prescription, not even explain the whole side effects and the long-term consequences of the medication we're prescribing. I totally get what you're saying. But I'm just curious, there is a private system that you're allowed to access in Quebec, because we're not allowed to do that in Ontario.
Yeah, currently, I don't know if it's going to change. I hope we don't take your example in Ontario, but there's the public, and then you can go choose and see a private doctor. So you pay, but all the prescriptions or the blood work or the imagery or the drugs that I prescribe, it all goes back to the public system. So it's basically just the consultation with me that is paid by the patients, and some of them have insurance, so their insurance actually reimburse. Some of them do, some of them don't. A lot of my patients are not necessarily rich. They believe that health is an investment, and that if you only get prescribed a bunch of drugs within a 10-minute consultation, but this is not health. This is not how you get better, and this is not how you prevent diseases. Unfortunately, obviously, not everybody can. Even if they see it that way, not everybody can afford to go private.
You're able to give that hour-long time to do a proper intake.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Okay. So we have time to look at everything. We have time to question everything. We have time to do like an analysis. I can play the detective, and we can really dig deeper. And that gives the best results. That's how we do, I think, proper medicine.
So that's your new Clinique Reversa. Yes. What about the Metabolic Summit that you just did like a few months ago, and then also your podcast?
I love to go to conferences and summits and all that all over the world, mainly in the United States, obviously, but everything is in English. And so it's easy for anyone to attend those conferences. They're not reserved for doctors or healthcare professionals. Anyone can sign up for those conferences, those summits and all that. You can watch them online. Ever since the pandemic, everything is online too. You can listen to great podcasts such as yours in English. There's so much information out there in English for metabolic health, for food addiction and all that. There's so little in French. It's just like it doesn't translate. And the French or the French-speaking people across the ocean, like in Europe, they do their own thing. They follow less America and English-speaking North America or whatever. So we found that our unilingual French-speaking people in Quebec and elsewhere in the world, they don't have the same amazing access to information as you get when you understand English. And we thought it was necessary to do an event that would be free, that would be accessible to anyone on metabolic health, to bring that knowledge. I think knowledge is power. Knowledge is, then you can make better decisions. Maybe your decisions won't be the best, maybe at this point in your life, but at least you can start thinking about it and maybe make a plan and maybe start changing. But if you don't know, you don't know. Yeah. So we created this summit. So basically 4 days, 10 conferences a day from doctors, from healthcare professionals, experts of all kinds on different topics related to metabolic health. So all the pillars of metabolic health. All the conferences were free for 24 hours. If you wanted like a 12-month access, then you paid for it. But otherwise, it was all free with no sponsorship from the pharmaceutical industry. So that just happened in June of this year. It was the second year. We launched it last year. Last year, 10,000 people showed up, participated in the event across the entire French-speaking planet. And this year, we got 15,000 participants. So I think we can say it's a knowledge success, not a financial success, but a knowledge success.
You're doing great work. That's very impressive. Okay, let's get to metabolic disease itself. Can you give us a thumbnail description for people who know what it is and then how it happens?
Sure. So metabolic health, mainly to keep it simple, it's what you put inside your body and what you do, your lifestyle habits, the exercise you do, the stress management you do, the sleep, how much sleep, is it quality sleep? Basically, all the lifestyle habits, how they impact the way we create energy, the way we use energy, the way we store energy. So if we have energy and everything works well, then all the hormones work well, the blood sugar works well, the insulin works well, the thyroid works well, the sex hormones work well, and we have energy and we feel well and we don't have diseases, lifestyle related diseases. But when things start to not work properly, then we can gain weight, we can have high blood pressure, our blood sugar can start to rise, we can get to metabolic syndrome, pre-diabetes, type 2 diabetes, etc. That's when we run into trouble. So when what we eat, what we don't eat, and the other lifestyle habits that we have, when they don't lead to our body functioning properly, that's when we develop diseases that are modern, that did not exist 100 years ago, were super rare. 150 years ago, we didn't have heart attacks. We didn't have type 2 diabetes. Obesity was really rare. High blood pressure was for really old people, if it happened. Alzheimer's was a lot rarer. A lot of cancers were a lot rarer. Not all of that is necessarily caused by our lifestyle habits, but definitely can be caused or can be deteriorated or aggravated by our lifestyle habits. So metabolic health looks at how this functions inside our body.
Can I ask you a few questions specifically about one of the things that we've seen popping up, and certainly I see it clinically with clients, is non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. So can you talk to us a bit about what are some of the common symptoms that people might notice?
That's such a good question, because there are no symptoms until really late in the course of the disease. So non-alcoholic fatty liver disease is when your liver starts to stock fat. It starts to become fatty, just like fatty liver that we could eat, like you could buy like in a French restaurant or whatever. The liver is not an organ that was meant to store fat. It was not meant to do that in humans. We can do it, but if we do it, it's under certain conditions, and we're meant to spend it out after to empty the liver. Some animals are meant to do that, like bears, before they hibernate. They want to have fatty liver disease because they're going to live off that fat and other fat reserves for the whole winter, right? Migrating birds are meant to have a fatty liver disease, but human beings were not meant to store fat permanently in our liver. And when we eat a lot of sugar, when we drink a lot of alcohol, or and alcohol and sugar, and we remember those are two molecules that are extremely similar. So they behave the same way, especially fructose. When we eat sugar, let's say table sugar, white sugar, okay? 50% of that sugar is glucose. It's going to go into the bloodstream and it's going to make our blood sugar levels go higher, right? Insulin's going to take care of that. We'll get back to that later. But 50% of white table sugar is fructose, and fructose does not go into the circulation for every cell. Almost no cell in the body can use fructose, except maybe the liver and some other cells like on the kidneys and stuff like that. But mainly it's the liver that can use fructose. So whenever we eat sugar, any sugar, honey, maple syrup, white table sugar, name it, okay? Real sugar, and 50% of it is unusable by the majority of our cells in the body. So that fructose goes into the liver. And if the liver doesn't need that kind of energy right now because it's overwhelmed with all kinds of energy coming in all the time, then it has a tendency to turn that sugar into triglycerides and to store the fat into itself. I don't know why. We don't know why exactly the liver decides to store fat into itself as opposed to keep exporting and all that. Probably when there's a lot of it coming in, too much coming in, and a lot of insulin and with hyper and insulin resistance chronically in the body. But when that happens, the body so the liver stores fat into itself and in the abdomen, in the abdominal cavity. So we tend to gain weight from the belly. We tend to gain weight inside the organs, around the organs, so under the muscle, into the cavity. And that's really problematic. So having a fatty liver is problematic, and storing fat into the abdominal cavity is really problematic too. Lots of inflammation, more insulin resistance. We enter like a vicious circle of the more inflamed you are, the more insulin resistant you will be. The more insulin resistant you are, the more inflamed you will be. So that's a vicious circle. But so the liver will start becoming lightly fatty, and you will not know. It won't even show up in your blood work. If you check your liver enzymes like ALT or AST, you will see no signs of that usually, because at first the enzymes are normal. There is no sign anywhere in your blood, direct signs, and there's no pain. There's no, you don't get like swollen on the right-hand side. Your liver is right on the right-hand side, just underneath your ribs. You can, if you do like a hook with your fingers and you try to under your ribs, it's uncomfortable, but that's how you feel your liver. And you're not supposed to feel it below the rib line. So when you do feel a liver below the rib line, that's because it's already a big liver. That's later in the process. But at first, you will have no signs, you will have no symptoms, you will have no pain, nothing. And most likely, if you see a general practitioner, like a family doctor, and your ALTs are in the normal range, you will be told everything is okay with your liver. But it's not true. It's not true, because enzymes, ALTs, they raise late in the process. You will have moderate to severe fatty liver disease usually before it shows in your blood.
Is that then the best test or procedure to find out what your liver, the quality of your liver, and if you have fatty liver disease?
No, enzymes are late in the process. They're late in the game. So the best way that is the most affordable, the most accessible, is to get an ultrasound. In certain parts of the world, like Ontario, it's probably really tough to get an ultrasound for no good reason other than the fact that you want to check if there's a fatty liver disease. You need to be sick to get access to proper tests. Prevention is not looked upon as something necessary. But I think we should, if we have the slightest suspicion of fatty liver disease, we should get an ultrasound on everyone, and then we should show the results to the patient and teach. It's a teachable moment where we can talk about lifestyle habits, we can talk about sugar, we can talk about alcohol, we can talk about the other lifestyle habits that have an impact.
Because the ultrasound shows the fat outside of the liver, inside the liver.
Yes, exactly. But when they do the ultrasound, they compare the color of the liver compared to the kidney. Is not an organ that can be infiltrated by fat. So the kidney remains really black on an ultrasound. And your liver, if it's infiltrated with fat, and it turns gray and then white. Mm-hmm. So we compare the two and we see how black or how white is the liver. So there's a bit of an observational, it's not, the ultrasound cannot tell you with precision, it's 52% fat or what. It's also in the eye of the radiologist or the technician. But once it starts to show as not as black as the kidney, it's already, 20-30% fats. And then the radiologist usually tells us, okay, it's slightly fatty or moderate or severe. After severe, there's no extra severe. After severe, you start to have stigmata of cirrhosis. Mm-hmm. And that part, as far as I know, what I've seen in my clinic, and I've seen thousands, because it's easy in Quebec. Up until now, it's been easy to order ultrasounds to check for fatty liver disease. So I do it on all of my patients. And it's actually rare that I have a patient without fatty liver disease. It's the exception nowadays. And this fits with the literature, what we see in the literature too. What
about triglycerids? Aren't we looking at the fatty liver disease plus high triglycerids?
Absolutely. If I want to have clues as to, does the person in front of me have fatty liver disease, might have fatty liver disease, I look at trigs. Absolutely, definitely. If it's above 1.1 or 1.1 and above, for me, it's a red flag. If the ALTs are for women above 19 or for men above 30, it's a red flag for me. If the HDL, the good cholesterol, is low, which is usually low, if the trigs are high, the HDL is low. They work in opposite, those two, all the time. So if the HDL is low, it's a red flag. If the waist circumference is higher, fitting the metabolic syndrome criteria, and those vary according to ethnicity. So Caucasians and Asians, for instance, have different criteria. You can look that up. People who are listening, you can look that up if you want. But if the waist circumference is a bit above optimal, that's another red flag. If there's high blood pressure, if fasting insulin is high, if fasting blood sugar is abnormal, not necessarily type 2 diabetes range, but if it's abnormal, those are all red flags that should say, usually in that package of metabolic syndrome comes fatty liver disease. Sometimes it's just moderate, sometimes it's lightly, but it's still a disease, a pathological process going on that people don't know. They're not aware of that. And if you don't show it to them, if you don't tell them about it, and if you don't explain how this came to be and how this can totally be reversed, then I think you're doing a disservice to your patients. People need to know, and people deserve to have the choice to the reverse or to just keep on keeping on.
That's a great visual. Like you said, a teachable moment. You're showing it to them, and then they look at you and they say, yeah, so what? So what is the consequence if the person doesn't change their food plan?
If you have moderate fatty liver disease, you have still no symptoms, right? And you might still have sort of normal enzymes, liver enzymes in your blood. Okay, so what's the matter? Why should you care about that? Exactly. You should care about that because it will progress. It doesn't stay stable. There's no status quo with fatty liver disease or insulin resistance. It's a vicious circle. The more time, as time goes on, you will get sicker and sicker. So eventually you will have severe liver disease. Eventually you will have cirrhosis. And eventually that cirrhosis can lead you to cancer. At that point, it's not reversible. So at that point, it's too late. But up until then, up until you start to have cirrhosis, stigmata, up until then, you can fully reverse your disease. The problem too is that if you have fatty liver disease, then you increase your insulin resistance. Why should you care about insulin resistance? Because insulin resistance is the root cause or positive or contributive to many of our modern diseases, such as type 2 diabetes, hypertension, liver disease, yeah, sure, polycystic ovarian syndrome, Alzheimer's, that is being called type 3 diabetes more and more, at least 16 or 17 cancers last time I checked. So there's a bunch of problems that are related to insulin resistance. Obesity is a strong one. Insulin is the hormone of fat storage. Every time you secrete insulin, you get a signal into your body that it's time to store fat. If you're someone who's really insulin resistant, you will store fat a lot faster, a lot quicker, with less calorie than someone who doesn't have insulin resistance. And it's going to be extremely difficult to lose your weight because insulin inhibits lipolysis. So insulin promotes fat storing and it prohibits your body to burn the fat that you already have. So fat is energy. It's good to have some fat. Everybody needs to have some fat. Actually, human beings that don't have the capacity to store fat, they don't really do well in life. But human beings were not meant to store a lot of fat. We're just meant to store a little bit for survival. Right?
Okay. So we've got our patient here and they're going, okay, you're telling me I've got a fatty liver. So what? I can say to them, that means that you're heading towards type 2 diabetes or insulin resistance, which then leads to all these other conditions. So you're moving onto that road and you're also more likely to become obese or you'll store fat more easily. See, those are concrete things that we want to tell people. And then the concept of liver cirrhosis, why does somebody care about that? They may not know what that looks like. Liver cirrhosis will look like alcohol liver cirrhosis. They don't look any different. It is basically a chronic health condition that is we're saying 15, 20 years of increasingly more conditions until you get sick and die.
Exactly. But the thing is, with insulin resistance, with fatty liver disease, with type 2 diabetes, you don't die quickly.
Yes.
You die bit by bit. It will take you years. You're going to die, but you're just going to rot on your way there, one piece at a time. You're going to lose your eyesight. You're going to have a heart attack. You're going to lose your kidneys. You're going to lose your toes. You're going to be brain fogged so much that it'll be hard to continue working and be productive. It's a slow, painful death that is fully avoidable. We used to think, Vera, that type 2 diabetes is chronic and progressive. It is chronic and progressive if you keep on doing what caused you to become type 2 diabetic in the first place.
Exactly.
It's lifestyle. For the vast majority of people who have type 2 diabetes today in 2024, it is caused by lifestyle habits.
Let's emphasize the big one, ultra-processed food.
Oh, yes. Diet, what you eat, what you put in your body is number one by far. You will not outrun your fork. You will not exercise enough to compensate for eating junk food, ultra-processed food. No, never. This is what is making us sick. This is what's new. It's the main thing that is new. What is new? People are saying, oh, we're so sedentary. We don't exercise anymore. If we had access to only real food, our appetites would downregulate and we would maintain healthy bodies and healthy weights because that's what we're designed to be. That's how a human being is optimal, just like animals. If there's abundance in nature, animals don't all of a sudden become obese in nature, wild animals, not cats and dogs. But human beings, we're meant to be optimal, but the food environment has changed so much in the last few decades that this is unfair. It's unfair for our bodies and for our brain. Ultra-processed foods.
And they are overtly toxic to the liver, starting this condition of fatty liver disease.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Now we know that it's reversible. We used to think it's just chronic and progressive. There's nothing that can be done. We're just going to give you medication to help you along the way so that your blood sugar doesn't go too high. We're going to control this with drugs. We still do this as doctors. We still control type 2 diabetes with lots of drugs. We throw a lot of medication at this. And when the medication is not enough, we throw insulin at this to make it even worse because type 2 diabetes is not a lack of insulin. It's too much insulin in a chronic way. So yes, if you don't change anything in your lifestyle habits because you don't know this is what caused it, but nobody told you, you didn't figure it out. And we should be, the doctors, we should be telling our patients, this is caused by your habits, your diet mainly, but the rest of your lifestyle habits. Therefore, if you don't want to be sick anymore, if you don't want to have type 2 diabetes anymore, you can reverse it. Every patient deserves to be told, it does not have to be chronic and progressive. What do you want?
If I'm somebody who now you've shown me the ultrasound and I'm like, okay, what do I do next? I want to reverse my fatty liver disease. What do I do? Is it diet? Is it exercise? Is it more sleep? Are there medications that I should be considering?
Medication, let me answer that. They're looking. Oh my God, there's a lot of studies going on for a lot of molecules right now because it's going to be a blockbuster. Whoever invents a drug that removes the fat from your fatty liver disease will make a lot of money. And all of a sudden, what do you think, Vera? All of a sudden, if there's a drug to reverse fatty liver disease, we're going to have guidelines to screen everybody for fatty liver disease, right? At this point, we don't. In Canada, we don't have guidelines that say we should screen for fatty liver disease. It's probably because most doctors feel there's nothing that can be done. It's fat. We're just going to look at it, get fatter and fatter as years go by. What's the point? No, there's a point because it's reversible. At this point, no drugs. I think the GLP-1s are they're working to get official indications for that. So Ozempic and Mounjaro and all of that, they're working on that for sure.
For fatty liver or just for obesity and diabetes?
Fatty liver as well. They're doing studies on that right now, but yeah, obesity definitely. Yeah. So other than that, there's not much at this point that we can give as a drug patient to reverse. It's purely lifestyle, mainly diet. So there are two things I say to my patients who have fatty liver disease. I say, first, we have to stop the insult. You have to stop putting stuff in your body that is making you sick and making your liver sick. So if you drink alcohol, even if it's moderate, and you have severe fatty liver disease, you need to stop the alcohol. It's toxic and it's not helping you. Even if it's just a little every now and then, if we're focused on reversing a disease, we have to make extra efforts. And I think this is a discussion that needs to be had. So if possible, you remove all alcohol for a few months to a few years. But the main, for me, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease happens in patients who really, it's not about the alcohol. It doesn't help, but it's not the cause. The cause is the food. So it's the ultra processed food. It's the high carbs, the excess of carbs. So eating a lot of starches, eating a lot of processed, eating a lot of sweets, eating a lot of donuts, pastries, and all that, cakes, cookies, desserts, all of that turns into molecules of glucose, which rise your blood sugar, but insulin will deal with that. And molecules of fructose, which your liver cannot handle really well. You can only handle 5-6 grams at a time or something, like a really small amount. If you drink a whole bottle of orange juice, for instance, or if you drink, it's a tsunami of fructose molecules that are hitting your liver really fast. So speed, quantity, the concentration, it's really bad. So people have to stop that. You have to really go on a whole food diet. And if possible, as low carb as possible. If you're really sick, then you need to go lower in your carbs because all the molecules of glucose and fructose are hitting your liver. And I think everybody has a threshold of how much carbs they can tolerate. And if you're really sick on the continuum of metabolic disease, if you're really insulin resistant, if you're really, your liver is really fatty, you have prediabetes or diabetes, high blood pressure, you have a lot of fat stored on your abdomen, you're inflamed, your inflammation markers are high in your body, then I think you need to make greater efforts in removing all the processed foods and to lower your carbs, stay away from starches and go back to whole food, go back to eating protein with vegetables that grow above the ground to keep it simple, some eggs in there. Have 3 meals a day maximum, 2 meals a day if you can. And if you don't have issues with fasting, if fasting doesn't trigger you and it's okay with you, then fasting is a good way to empty your liver. So with people who like to fast and can fast, I teach them to go for prolonged fast. So 36 hours, 48 hours, 72 hours. In the literature, 72 hours is you can reduce about 27% of your fatty liver disease in a 3-day fast. And we have a lot of this knowledge from bariatric surgeries when they make people fast so that they would shrink the liver so that they see better when they go in there with the cameras. We know how to shrink a liver. This is known in the medical literature. We just don't apply this to our patient in clinics, or maybe we think they cannot handle a 3-day fast. And a lot of people cannot, but it's not my call to determine if the patient in front of me can or cannot. It's my call to give the information and to accompany my patients in whatever decisions they make. But I think people deserve to have this information. Now, if you cannot fast for 3 days, and one fast is not going to do it. So basically, you want to repeat your fast. So 1 week, you do 2 times 24 hours. Next week, you do 142 hours. If you do that over a few weeks, a few months, you will empty your fatty liver disease. It will go back to normal. And that is the great thing about liver, is that it's an organ that can totally regenerate itself. It's a good organ for that. If you smoke 2 packs of cigarettes a day for 40 years and you destroy your lungs, they are destroyed. Goodbye. You cannot recover them. But with the liver, you can. If it has a chance, it will regenerate itself and it will go back to being a nice little cute dark liver.
You were talking about that concept of the more metabolically deranged you are, the more carb sensitive you are. In other words, You want to be lower in low carb. Wouldn't that then imply that somebody who wants to do a plant-based whole food may be doing very well if they're not that damaged? But if they are considerably damaged, high insulin resistance, they may not be able to do a plant-based diet anymore. Isn't that right?
Exactly. It's much, much more challenging. You can be keto. However, your food is going to be extremely limited. So it's very repetitive. It can be done. There are books on that, but it's very repetitive. And there's an issue with the protein because plant-based protein are not absorbed as well. They're not bioavailable as well as meat and animal protein. And this is just a fact. This is all over the literature. We can even have tools online and indexes that show you what is bioavailable and what is absorbed and what is less absorbed and stuff. So this is not even an ethical or whatever debate. This is a fact. Animal-based protein are more well absorbed than plant-based protein, and plant-based protein usually come with extra carbs. And so if you're extremely sick, it's a big challenge. What I see in clinic is people who are vegetarian that are really metabolically deranged, metabolically sick. It just doesn't work. It doesn't work. Even if you eat low glycemic index, it's not just how much your blood sugar rises after a meal that matters. It's how much insulin you're going to secrete to manage the entire quantity of molecules of glucose and fructose that you just ingested. And that is hard to appreciate because we cannot check our insulin levels at home. We can check the blood sugar. And some of my patients are like, oh, but when I eat this, my blood sugar doesn't go high at all. And I'm like, no, it doesn't, because the absorption rate varies according to what you eat, how you eat it, when you eat it. You eat it with protein, with fat, on an empty stomach, blah, blah. Those are variables that will make your blood sugar rise more or rise less. But the area under the curve, how many molecules of glucose and therefore how many units of insulin you're going to have to fabricate and secrete to manage all of that, this is the real issue. And so very difficult to do with plant-based. It's a big challenge. What I see in clinic is that those people, if they're bent on remaining plant-based, then it's very hard to achieve reversal, type 2 diabetes reversal, very hard.
Now, in the introduction, you said you did some training in addiction as well as your food addiction with Bitten. So let's talk about food addiction. How do you deal with that in your clinic?
Yes, it's a major issue. It's a major issue because most people who have fatty liver disease or type 2 diabetes, to say, okay, or obesity, and that the root cause of all of that, and it's not always the root cause, but majority of the patients I see, the root cause is insulin resistance. So hyperinsulinemia that is chronic, that has generated insulin resistance. And now it's a vicious circle that feed each other. So the majority of the patients who have those conditions have insulin resistance. A lot of them don't know that it's caused by their diet because they think the way to go is to eat low fat, to preserve the heart, to not get heart diseases and stuff. Right. They follow the Canadian food guide or the American food guide and stuff like that. So they think, a lot of them think they eat properly. A lot of them think they eat balanced. I get that every day. Oh, but doctor, I have a really well-balanced diet. I eat super healthy, doctor. I don't understand why I'm diabetic. I eat super well. And I think people don't realize that everything that they eat turn into either, if it's protein, it turns into amino acids. Those are building blocks for your body. That's great. If you eat fat, it turns into lipids. It turns into energy. That's great. But if you eat anything else, it has glucose in it or fructose or both, and it will turn into molecules of glucose that will raise your blood sugar, that will go into your liver, and that may create extra fat in there. So people don't know that if you eat quinoa, if you eat pasta, if you eat white rice in your sushi, that it turns into sugar. But once you tell them, read about it, once they know, there's a proportion of those people, they will go on and do really well and just reverse it, just like easy. They will struggle a little bit to give up on the goodies that they love, but on average, they will do really well. They won't need a lot of intervention on my part. There's a percentage of the population, either they refuse to give up what is making them sick. They refuse. They're like, I'm not ready. I don't have time. I'm overwhelmed right now. I cannot remove that from my food, from my diet.
Addicted. They're not saying it, but that's what they're showing.
That took a while to figure this out, Vera. Addicted, that's the word they're not saying, but that they're saying. It took me years to figure this out. And that's why I went to get extra training, because I am not equipped to deal with people who realize they're causing their own health problems, and that are cannot act, or they start reversing, they get on board. They cut all the carbs, they cut all the crappy food and all that, and they get results, and they start losing weight, and the blood sugar gets better, and I de-prescribe medication, and everybody's going, oh my God, this is so awesome. And then they fall, and then they cannot get back on track, and they come back, and they see me 6 months later, they've regained all the weight, they've regained all the medication, and they know. So this is what was the light bulb moment for me, is when I had this patient who did so well. She was type 2 diabetic for 35 years. She was taking a lot of insulin. She had all the medication. She had all the comorbidities related to type 2 diabetes. We reversed all of that together. She lost 80 pounds. She was doing so well. And then she disappeared. And then when she came back, she was super sick and she had regained the weight. And I was like, how can that be? Because if you do, right? Simple. No, not simple. There is food addiction, and food addiction is extremely powerful. And food addiction will make you kill yourself, even if you know you're doing it. Alcoholic people, they know they're killing themselves. It is not about them not wanting to die or them just not having the willpower. It's not about that. It's addiction. It's a disease. It's a disease in the brain. It's a disease that if we don't help those people, they will literally kill themselves slowly, bit by bit. They will rot away for the next 20 years, 30 years.
You described it so well. People will do it despite negative consequences. What do you do in your clinic when it's clear that you've got one of them sitting in your chair?
We name it. We talk about it. I tell them, I think this is what you have. I think this is the issue. And most people, they know deep down in their heart that they have an issue with food, that this is not normal behavior, that they are doing this to themselves and that they feel powerless. And a lot of people, just that we have this discussion is huge because it's shameful to have an addiction, right? Obviously, you're not a good person. Obviously, you don't have willpower. Obviously, you're not as smart as the other or whatever. It's a moral thing. That's what we think, right? If we have an addiction, we think this reflects bad on us and that we're bad people by default. So this is not something that gets discussed. So just to bring it up and have this conversation, I think it's already a good start with my patients. Now, if you want to know what we actually do to help them get out of it, then it's simple and not easy. It's abstinence. You cannot be moderate. You cannot have a little bit every now and then. Not you. Unfortunately, not you. Food is not your friend, and food cannot be a little bit ultra-processed food. Your trigger foods, obviously not salmon and boiled spinach. Nobody's addicted to that in particular, especially boiled spinach. But ultra-processed food, the food that really triggers you, the food that makes you lose control, the food that makes you sick and it's impossible for you to stop, that food, it needs to stop completely. You cannot be moderate. So we have to work on that. We have to establish what are your triggers. We have to establish how else are you going to eat and how else are you going to cope with life, because addiction is also the way that you've been coping with a lot of bad events and good events and bad emotions and good emotions and too much stress and too much overwhelm. It's become your main mechanism, and this needs to be changed. And it's super hard because it's in your brain. It's a highway, right? And it's so easy for your brain to want to go there.
That's great. You are treating metabolic disease, but a lot of the people that you see are obese, most likely, right? And they're interested in weight loss. And if I were having this interview with you as a weight loss physician, we would not be talking about the same things. We wouldn't be talking about food addiction, and we might not even be talking about metabolic disease, right? Aren't you on the fringe of the general population of people dealing with obesity?
Yes, and obesity nowadays is trying to find the right medication that you will tolerate, that will be effective. And then eventually we realize that this doesn't work. So we send you on to bariatric surgery. When I did my training, I did my certification, the American Board of Obesity Medicine. So I did the obesity course in Harvard. At the training, the course that we had to take, it was so saddening. It was so maddening because we didn't discuss diets. We didn't discuss lifestyle. We didn't discuss lean muscle mass, how important it is to have muscles to increase your metabolic rate, how important it is to manage your stress, to find other coping mechanisms, how important it is to sleep. Make sure you don't have sleep apnea. Make sure you sleep enough. Make sure all those things. We did not discuss those things. We discussed drugs, surgeries, interventions, liquid diets, like those commercial stuff. We discussed how to start a teenager on weight loss journeys. Mind you, it was an American course. That's how they do health and lifestyle or whatever. It's really focused on an intervention coming from the outside that is quick and efficient. And it's not much related to lifestyle habits. And that just, I wouldn't say it broke my heart because my expectations were not so high, but it was really saddening because I don't think that's how you solve anything. I don't think we should do bariatric surgeries on 13-year-old kids. And that's what we do in Quebec. The age is 13 years old and up. And I think that's really sad. Not that I think nobody should get bariatric surgery. I just think we should, as a society, as doctors, as obesity, we should offer a lot more. We should have a team in the public system, a team of healthcare professionals there to help people. I think surgery could be there, but could be the last resort, not the first or second resort. Yeah.
Also, we're talking about giving injections, giving Ozempic or the GLP-1s to children.
Yes, 6 years old and up. This is what is being studied right now, 6 years old. This is a type of hormone. And what do we know of the long-term effects, like 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, when those kids want to have children, for instance? We know nothing, but it's going to get approved with a really short time frame of study. They're probably going to study it for 18 months and then go, yeah, that's good enough. That's pretty safe. And it's worse to be obese, right? This is much better. I don't disagree that it's terrible for a body to be in obesity because there's a lot of inflammation. It's hard on the heart. It's hard on the brain. It's hard on the joints. It's hard for mobility. It's really hard to be in a body that is overweight. There is no doubt about that. I just think that we ought not to only offer drugs and surgeries to our patient, especially if we know they have food addiction, if we have screened for food addiction, and that's what the person in front of us has, then the surgery will not work in the long term. And the GLP-1 will not, the injections, they will not work. I have not seen so far a patient in whom the GLP-1s work indefinitely. Never. So far, at some point, it stops working. You've built tolerance. It just doesn't work anymore for you. It doesn't do it. Or you just can't afford it. Or it's back order and you don't get access to it. Or whatever, your insurance doesn't cover it anymore. Something happens. I have not seen one case so far of somebody, not one case, of someone who indefinitely has been on this for years and years and it's still working just as great. I have not seen that. We know those have tremendous issues. You don't lose so much fat mass. You lose a lot of muscle mass. It cuts your appetite, right? So you're not going to throw yourself onto a big steak. You're going to eat little crackers, a little tomato sandwich, some stuff like that, right? You're just going to eat small little things with not a lot of protein in it. That's what everybody does. And you're not going to train. You're not going to work those muscles because you're going to think, I'm losing weight anyway. Why do I need to train? Because training is for weight loss, right? No, training is for health. Training is for sleep. Training is for well-being, for mental health, is for bone density, is for metabolic rate, it's for your heart. Training is for everything, but it's not for weight loss, right? But if you do weight loss with those injectables and you don't eat enough protein, which is what everybody does, and you don't train your muscles, you will lose a lot of lean mass. You will lose a lot of muscle mass. That means your metabolic rate will go down. So eventually, when that injectable doesn't work for you anymore, you have no muscle left, right? So your metabolic rate is super low. You have no muscle to keep it up, right? And all of a sudden, your brain is not calm anymore because those injectables, they cut your appetite, sure, but they also calm your reward system, right? Food is less interesting. There's less of a voice talking to you, right? But that comes back. That comes right back, right? So what happens if all of a sudden your appetite is back to normal or increased and your food thoughts are back and you don't have a metabolic rate, your metabolic rate is low because you don't have muscles anymore, what happens? You're going to regain all that fat and more.
And more.
You haven't addressed anything. You haven't dug at the root.
When I say that to somebody that I'm interviewing, they'll say, but by then there'll be a new medication that will have a different angle. We'll always be one step ahead.
I don't buy that. I don't buy that at all.
Okay. So another question I have, what about the person who said, okay, Evelyn, I've done what you've told me to do, or Dr. Roy, because you're the doctor. I followed the diet, I'm exercising, and I'm resting, but I still can't get rid of that last 20 or 30 pounds. Can I use the meds then? Will that work forever? Or is that also just a short-term solution?
I'm not saying it's not a tool in the box. It is. And for some people, when I do prescribe it, I prescribe it in people who are committed to change their lifestyles and to weight train. If you don't weight train, I am not prescribing that to you because I am doing you a disservice. You're going to think this is good and it's working, but you're destroying yourself on the inside. So you must commit to weight train. And for people who are, I'm not sure if you want me to say this, but for people who have severe decompensated food addiction and that are really low in the hole, and sometimes this tool can bring peace to the brain. And this peace, it can be extremely valuable. And I am not the one to judge. You deserve it. Some people are at a point where this needs to stop. What's going on in their brain needs to stop. So it can be a tool for that, but it cannot be the only tool. It cannot be my only suggestion to you, my only approach, my only prescription to you. And if that's all I prescribe to you and I let you go with it, then I am not doing good medicine. I need to accompany you in what needs to be changed permanently in your lifestyle. And it's not easy, and you're not going to succeed all at once at everything. It's a process, and you need to accompany patients who are doing that. So yes, it can be a tool, but it needs to be not the only tool that you offer patients.
You have such an important message to give. This is so important, not only patients, but the obesity clinicians to hear. What is next for you? You've got so many ventures going on. Where is it that you're putting most of your energy now or planning to?
I'm going to be a little selfish here, and I'm perimenopause now, and that requires more attention than I thought. So right now I'm in the process of, doing clinic and doing more project and everything. But I also want to take the time to not drive my life at 200 kilometers an hour because hormones and age is catching up on me, and I'm a great producer of cortisol hormone, the hypervigilance hormone, and that can also make you sick. So I'm in the process of working on myself to have better work-life balance, continue what I do with metabolic health, longevity, optimization. Hormone replacement therapy is a big thing. We didn't get to discuss that at all today, but I've done a lot of training in hormone replacement therapy, and I am convinced we are doing disservice to all those women out there who are not being offered the option of maybe taking hormones. And also, I don't think we do a good job in general with perimenopause, menopause, and to check thyroid issues that are not just TSH. If TSH is okay, then everything is okay. Not necessarily. I think we need to dig deeper into balancing hormones for people who are in the process of getting their health back and reversing their chronic conditions. So we don't have time to talk about hormones, but I'm into this right now, how to better help people balancing their hormones, because it has a huge impact on their metabolic health and on their well-being. But my main project right now is to get good and balance myself, because you don't mess with perimenopause. It messes with you.
Would you be willing to come back to do a perimenopausal talk?
This is important for our listeners, for sure. Hormone replacement, perimenopause, and thyroid. I would love to talk about all those things with you. Yes,
such important topics. And you know what? 100% of women, we're going to go through this, right? So it's best, I think, if you're informed and prepared, or if you have knowledge so you can better deal with this before, during, and after. This is extremely important. And it's important for men too. If you have women in your environment, your sister, your wife, your mother, whatever, this is relevant too. We could also talk about andropause if you want, or testosterone deficit, because andropause sounds old, but nowadays more men are younger and younger when they start to have testosterone deficit. It's related to our lifestyle. Yeah, that also has huge impact on weight gain, muscle mass, mood, mental health. So definitely hormones is a big important topic for metabolic health and well-being.
And so if we have listeners and maybe they're in Canada, but maybe they're not in the province of Quebec, are they able to see you privately?
In Quebec, super easy. In the rest of Canada, it's a bit more complicated, but we can probably organize something if they want my opinion. It's harder for me to prescribe tests and to prescribe medication. There's an extra level of challenge there. But for a discussion, for my opinion, definitely this can be organized.
And what would be the best way for people to reach you?
Ooh, I don't have a best way in English. I have a website with my name. So if you listeners have my full name spelled correctly, and if you type that in Google, you will find my website. And at the bottom of it, you will find an email address that I receive into my phone and into my computer. So that's one way of reaching me that is easy. In English, it's no problem. I speak Spanish too, if there are unilingual Spanish speakers out there.
Of course you do.
Probably not.
Of course you
Probably
do.
not listening to your podcast.
We are translating it right now into Spanish. So to reach
fantastic.
a wider audience. So
what a good idea.
Definitely stay tuned. And we'll make sure to put your information all in the show notes so people can reach you as well. Thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me again.
Thanks for joining us this week on Food Junkies Recovery from Food Addiction. Make sure to join our Facebook group, Sugar Free for Life Support Group. I'm Sweet Enough. Molly and Clarissa are food addiction professionals who offer one-to-one counseling and group coaching through Sweet Sobriety. Please subscribe to our show so you never miss an episode. While you're at it, if you found value in today's episode, we'd appreciate you leaving us a review on your favorite platform. Your feedback helps grow our show and allows us to reach others who need to hear this message of recovery. Don't forget to pick up a copy of Dr. Tarman's book, Food Junkies. And as Vera always says, the power is ours.